is Aaron Hayslip, and on today's episode of Develop Yourself, we have two very special guests, Nathan Drake and Doug West. Nathan and Doug are recent graduates of Parsity, the online code school we run, and they, instead of stepping directly into a job as junior software developers, they actually started their own Web3 development agency. That's right, they have figured out how to full-time build Web3 NFT minting apps. To be specific, that's probably the project they're working on the most, instead of going into being a junior software developer. And this happened all in a matter of weeks once they graduated. And this story you're about to hear is how that all came about and how you might be able to do something like this as well. These are two phenomenal people, and they were great students, and I bet they're going to have a ton of success in the future. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for being part of the podcast. Just kind of give some context for our listeners. Doug and Nathan just finished Parsity, and I told them this wasn't going to be a plug for Parsity by any means. The main thing I want everyone to kind of take away from this interview is that whenever you do learn to code and you finish a code school or something, that the only path for you to go on is not necessarily just like begging for a junior job. So I'm going to go ahead and give away what we're going to be talking about here, which is that you guys started your own organization, your own company. And of all companies, you didn't start just any company. You started a Web3 development agency to basically build decentralized applications. And I think the crazy thing about that is a lot of folks wouldn't even know what that is, right? Or even really understand what Web3 is. But you guys went through it full force. So maybe let's start with the end and talking about what y'all have been doing recently, what a Web3 app is, how you got into Web3, like how did this come about? And then would love to kind of backfill with your story a little bit if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're mostly working on now is a few different forms of like NFT minting websites. And so I don't know if that would technically qualify as a decentralized app because there's not really anything decentralized about it. I mean, some things are happening on the blockchain, but decentralized app or DApp is just the, that's the hip term to call it. But yeah, so, basically most of our people that we're working with right now are have an idea for some kind of NFT, and they need a place where people can buy it, essentially. And so 99% of that is like traditional Web 2 technologies, React, Node, that kind of thing. And then there's just a little bit that's connecting it to the blockchain. And that's basically where we're at. In terms of how do you how we got into Web3, I've owned Bitcoin ETH for a while, pretty casually. Actually, like right when I started Parsity, I kind of dove in headfirst into NFTs. I think partially due to some podcasts I heard on the Tim Ferriss show. A lot of people talk about it there. I started hearing about just some more of the vision and thesis for crypto, and then also like some of your podcasts got me into it. You actually recommended that I start listening to Bankless podcast, and that was one of my launch points for sure. I basically just at that point got on Twitter, started buying NFTs. I just kind of like recognized that this space is important. Seems like a good idea for a new developer to get into. And I just kind of dove in and hoped that on the other side that there would be like a payoff for it.
That's really funny. It's so funny that you say that because I think sometimes I get surprised by how small timelines are for folks. Like you can go from, basically not being part of the industry to an expert in, a matter of months because there's just not much history out there, especially when it comes to like the Web3 space being, it's got a lengthy, we're almost 10 years into like the financial history of Web3 or crypto, but it's a pretty new space when it comes to like building applications. So the funny thing that I just took away from that is that right now, like you're probably ahead of me in terms of being able to build, these minting apps, because right now I'm working on a part of the curriculum for DevMint, our Web3 school, where I'm supposed to be kind of integrating React and ethers and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh god, what am I? First, I have to like get a contract deployed, and I'm like asking Brian, like, how do you deploy a contract? And I'm like, I'm sure all these other folks already know how to do this. So that's really cool that it went that quickly. Doug, what about you, man? What prompted you to start thinking about? I mean, did Nathan like get you into Web3? Were you already thinking about the crypto or that world?
Yeah, he had to kind of twist my arm a little bit, to be honest, because I think I, like so many people, was just completely ignorant to what it means, and you try talking about it with your family and friends, and they just act like it's mystical nonsense, fake money and stuff. And when you get to the root of like what it really means, and kind of what these smart contracts really are, it's like kind of actually the way that things should just work, which is kind of cool. And I think once that curtain goes down a little bit and you see through it, it's like, okay, like Nathan said, 90% of what I touched so far has been just regular old coding, just like anything else. But there are some fun little libraries and some poking around, test nets and MetaMask and that stuff at first that you're just like, what am I looking at here?
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah. It's been cool. I think the most attractive thing to us right now is just like there's room in the space. Like if we were to go straight towards a traditional junior dev job, like you're talking about, we would be competing with hundreds of thousands of people, and people in Web3 like desperately need developers. Like a lot of them are not front end guys at all. So there's like a little niche there, which is really nice. Yeah,
no, that's awesome, man. That's some product market fit there for sure. If you have the abilities and and I think you're right. I think like the learning curve isn't as steep as you might think when it comes to, I think when you hear blockchain, it's like, oh god, you're doing some like hardcore cryptography or something, and you're really not. Like, thankfully, all of that work has really already been done for you, and you're using libraries to build on top of some of the hard stuff. Not that what you're offering isn't amazing, because as you said, there's very few people who are doing it right now. So to kind of basically explain it a little bit, y'all are, I guess maybe we should back up to when that became an idea. Okay, you finished Parsity. Like, what was like the technical time frame that you graduated? I don't even remember.
So we finished up in May, and I actually don't think that I have technically graduated yet. I still owe Peter a video, but I've been had a couple things going on. But yeah, we started in January, finished up in May.
It's great. This is perfect, guys. Thank you for ruining my show. No, I'm just kidding.
You're welcome.
So you said May?
Yes.
Okay, May. All right. And then did y'all both start the job hunt then? Or like what was the timeline between, all right, I'm finishing up Parsity. What did you have in mind that this was what you wanted to do afterward? And then how did that, like what was like the journey to, oh, now I'm starting my own company and this seems like a good idea? Walk me through that a little bit.
Sure. It was definitely a unique experience. I think heading towards the end of the program, my goal was just like, I want any job where I feel, remotely interested in the product and where I feel valued and where I can learn. And so, obviously that's pretty broad, but I honestly wasn't too sure. I was interested enough in Web3 at that point to where I was like, if I could get a job for Coinbase or somewhere, that'd be awesome. And obviously that wouldn't have worked out. They just laid off everybody. But so for me, thanks to a connection through you, I started a contract gig like the day I finished for a Web3 gaming company. And that was cool because it let me get my hands on production code immediately without having to commit long term. Like I could see if I liked it or if I got along with the people, if I liked the product. And I definitely did. But somewhere along the way, well, actually through meeting Brian Schuster, he kind of came to me with somebody else who needed some contract work. And at first I was like, well, I don't have time for that. But as I started thinking about it, I realized that, if I partner with somebody like Doug, then maybe we can take on more projects than just one of us could. So, this is all developed over the last month, but it went pretty quickly from, a job search ish to, oh, we're starting a company now, and we've already got, I think I told you earlier, we just got our first check. So like a month from like that to now, which is crazy because I've tried to start other types of businesses before and never got this far with a lot more effort and a lot more time. So it's been, it's moved really fast.
That's awesome. That's always a good sign. You're doing something right, because and I think that happens a lot for entrepreneurs, is they think there must be something wrong with them, and it's just the market. Like the fit hasn't happened yet, and so if you keep on going, and it looks like this was a beautiful marriage of the things that you're interested in happen to also be the market. So was at the point. So okay, just backing up a little bit.
Sure.
So Brian, for our listeners who don't know, Brian is a partner with me on a different business we have. I've known him for a long time. He's basically one of these crazy guys who is just always learning and always building something, even if it's not making him any money. And he doesn't really care about, necessarily the money or the prestige from it. And so it sounds to me like Brian was just kind of feeding you some folks that had projects they wanted him to build that, to be honest, I don't think he could have built it, because I don't know that Brian doesn't know React. That's why I'm doing the React portion of the curriculum. So he could if he wanted to sit down and learn React, but I don't think Brian really cares to learn React. So he's like, okay, I can't do these anyways. But Nathan, and surely by, I guess, the relationship that you built with him, and then just showing that you were interested, right, in Web3, that's probably why he thought of you. Is like, okay, here's a hungry guy who, knows how to build software. He's been doing it obviously through the program and all that, and the projects that he's seen you build, and then he's interested in Web3. I guess that's why he thought of kind of sending this your way.
Yeah. So I had interacted with him briefly on LinkedIn. I think we connected due to your podcast. He's been on here a couple times, and I could just tell that I was, interested in some of the things he had to say. And me and Doug live in Austin. He came to Austin for a crypto conference, Consensus, and I just asked, like, hey, would you happen to have time for coffee? And that turned into him taking me to dinner, and then we just hung out for a while. He took me to a happy hour after that too, so we hung out for a long time and got along pretty well. And yeah, I think he just, I think, like you said, hungry and available. And I think, another thing is, if you have a Web3 project and you want to get it done, you're going to get if you go to a firm that's well established, you're going to get a quote anywhere from like 30 to 150 grand. And spoiler, we're not charging that. So I think having for people that are hiring us, I think just having the recommendation of somebody like Brian, who I haven't worked with, but he knows that I trust me enough to refer people to me. And then also, like, this is a place where I think our experience helps us, is that people know that we don't have a ton of experience, but because of that, we're charging less than the other guys, and they're able to get a project done, and we're able to get work.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it won't be like that for long. So,
yeah,
if you're listening, need a project done. If you want it for quote cheap, now's the time to do it with these guys.
Yeah, we'll be charging $150 next month.
Next month, that's right. Before this episode can even air. No, I'm just kidding. Man, that's super cool. I love that. That's like the story that you want everyone to be aware of, is that you really can start something, and it doesn't have to be. I think oftentimes I'll like write these posts on LinkedIn that's sort of tongue in cheek, saying, hey, if you want to learn to build great software, just start building stuff and build it from a position as if you're trying to build something real, kind of like the indie hacker model of like, try and build something to make revenue. And then I always get, all kinds of flack from people saying like, well, if it's so good that you can make revenue, why don't you just start your own business? It's like, well, maybe you should. It's in some cases, it's really not that much harder to, and not that it has been hard for y'all, and you won't encounter lots of difficulty. But I think it's a misnomer to think that going and getting a job is going to be the easy part. Because sometimes, as evidenced by what's going on right now, there's a lot of folks, which is normal, looking for gigs and probably working way harder than you are. And now you get to put your heads down and build a little bit. You'll still have to do some of that business development stuff along the way too. Okay, now I want to back up and talk about your journey, because both of you have different backgrounds that have nothing to do with necessarily coding and software. Maybe we'll start with Doug here, because we've been talking to Nathan a lot about his Web3 fantasies. But Doug, what originally prompted you? Because you came through Parsity same time Nathan did. Y'all just finished together, and so y'all started. I'm trying to reverse this. Was that? No, not. I guess January, right? The January program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the January program. So, but it'd been quite a few months before that you kind of got in and got everything locked in. What originally got you thinking about doing software, Doug?
Yeah, so I think that I called you probably around July, I think, is when you and I first spoke about me joining. And it was something I'd been interested in a while. I would say a couple of years previously, when I was just like fed up with restaurants, which is what I have been doing for the past several years before this. I did a little bit of a Harvard course that was kind of just like a intro to computer science, and I was like, okay, this is cool. Don't really understand a lot of it. Don't really feel like diving into it right now. But as things got crazier and crazier for restaurant people during the pandemic, and we had to reconcept the restaurant that we were at like 4 times, and have these bouts of people getting COVID anyway, even though we were being as safe as we could. I just realized, like, I've got to do something different. Like, there's long-term security in food because people are always going to want it. But there's not necessarily immediate security for your paycheck or even your health the way that things are going these days. So I think after, like some years of management and working 65, 70 hours a week at night and never seeing my wife and never seeing my dog, I was just like, Nathan's doing this. Nathan and I have been friends, for 15 plus years now, probably. And like, I trust his opinion of things. And he was like, hey, I know Aaron through these people at Stone, and this place seems legit. And I'm super happy that I did it, because I think that it's giving me the ability to kind of carve out my own path a little bit more and not be so dependent on a certain kind of business model or a certain kind of financial climate or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I love that. And then same to you, Nathan. If you kind of summarize like your background and story, like what prompted you to get into software as well?
Sure. So before the pandemic, I was in the music industry as a drummer, audio engineer, stage manager. I played in my own band, Courier, for a while. Doug and I played in a metal band in high school. Then I moved to stage managing, and so I was stage managing for a band, Josh Abbott Band, a Texas country band before the pandemic.
Nice.
And it was a good gig. Really solid. I was basically getting steady. Basically, the gig there was I got steady income. I had health insurance, and we did like 2 to 3 shows every weekend. And so on paper, that seems pretty good, because like, okay, you're working twice, 2 days a week, and you get health insurance, which is kind of like best, that's unheard of in the music industry. But in reality, we're working like 15-hour days outside in the Texas heat, because for some reason every single country show is in the desert in the summer. But basically, it was just like, okay, this is like best case scenario, probably like realistic best case scenario for the music industry. And I was exhausted all the time and not fulfilled. And so when the pandemic hit, it honestly gave me a chance to reset. And I'm glad I did, because like I'm going on over, that was March 2020. This is July 2022. So almost 2.5 years on a career change. And if you had told me it would have taken that, I never would have left that to do this. So I'm kind of glad I had that like kick in the pants to do it. And it still even took me like over a year and a half to find Parsity. So during the pandemic, I went back to school to finish a degree just in business, but I really wanted to be a product manager. So I just started applying for jobs as a product manager, got heard back from absolutely no one, started applying for jobs as like a customer support or tech supporter, thinking I could get my foot into the door anywhere, got nothing back. And during this, I was learning to code, but I just never thought that I would want to sit all day and code. Even though I was relatively tech savvy, it just didn't appeal to me. And so what led me to Parsity was just a random Facebook blast like, hey, I need help getting a job in tech. And an acquaintance of ours from 10 or 15 years ago said I should talk to you, and we talked, and I wasn't even intending to look for a boot camp, but it was there, and I just kind of like, okay, I have no other plans, let's just do this. And that was that. And I signed up I think in August, and it wasn't even until January. It was just like I just needed something to commit to. And it was nice to have that time to prep beforehand, just to like I had been learning Python, so I needed to switch to JavaScript, and that definitely helped, having a little bit more time to prepare in JavaScript before like diving in head first.
Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, I've had this. What's the song? I want to touch your skin. I want to feel.
Is that a Josh Abbott song?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Anywho, I don't know if you drink the product or not, but
I'm horrible with song names, so I don't remember it. But I've heard all of those songs too many times to like them anymore.
yeah, I'm sure. And then okay, what about this metal band?
Sent me one track.
Of what?
I think you sent me one track the entire time that you were doing that gig. So, obviously not your thing.
Oh, Josh Abbott. Yeah. What about what's the deal with the metal band? Y'all were in a metal band together? What do you?
Yeah. So
what do you
we
play?
Met, in Colorado, of all places, at a church camp, and this would have been, I think, probably my sophomore year. And Nathan was homeschooled, so we would have like never met otherwise, I don't think. But I had been just kind of like messing around in people's garages and stuff. I started playing guitar in middle school, and had thrown together some ideas. And this was at the beginning of the mall screamo era of alternative music. And I think
mall screamo?
Yeah, mall screamo.
I never heard of that term, but it makes sense to me. Is that because like
Google
bands would play inside of Hot Topic?
Yeah, like you'll see a wall of shirts at Hot Topic with all the mall screamo bands.
Of course.
It's a thing. Yeah.
I didn't know the term.
So we kind of had to listen to alternative music, and that was something that we bonded over. And I think next we started actually like playing for like the youth group together and that stuff before we had any like fully formed songs of our own. So it was kind of funny to like lead worship for these like middle schoolers, and then see some of them show up on your shows of the weekend and like watch you scream and thrash around like an idiot. So
should melt their faces off.
Yeah, totally.
Wait, did you play guitar? Who is the screamer guy?
That's the weird thing is like the first band really like I sang and screamed and played guitar.
This is way off topic, but
which is something that I didn't
Nice.
even really know that I could do. And okay, I'll bring it back because I think this is a good analogy for coding. Honestly, you kind of pick up some skills here and there, and you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to piece anything together because you don't have any context, right? And suddenly some context gets dropped on you, like maybe a deadline for a show or like a coding project on effing Backbone or something. And suddenly that like necessity and that
Don't say it.
context,
Don't say Backbone.
the B word. Like suddenly that context and like that, oh, I have to do this, brings something out of you that you didn't necessarily know was in there, and your brain just kind of smacks some pieces together. So like, I could kind of play guitar, not very well at the time. I certainly couldn't sing, and I was, I'd never really screamed before, but for some reason, needing to do all three of them at the same time, I think made it better than it would have been otherwise. So
That's awesome. No, I asked because I feel like, so I was in that scene like in high school. We had like a metalcore band, and I was the screamer guy, and
nice.
it was everyone like my wife still. Like, I think when we first started dating, I played her a track of it, and she like legitimately for like a week looked at me differently. She's like, "What? Are you like that guy?" And because I still have like, you probably can't see, but I had the scars from the big gauges and all the things. But I feel like I feel like there's so many people I meet that have that background, and it always excites me that like, and we meet again, and it's sort of like this like creative energy, I feel like that comes with like building software, that this background of music, of doing things differently, which, back then I guess mall screamo, everyone was kind of doing it. It got real cool at one point, so you can't kind of can't say that. But all right, that was a huge side rabbit hole that I wanted to go down, because I wanted to hear that you guys were in metal bands and stage managing for a country band at the same time. That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, I love, Nathan, what you were saying though, that like the pandemic sort of like forced you, right? Like, and I think it had that result for so many of us, that it forced us to do something outside of our comfort zone and different. And I love that you're like, okay, maybe I'll go do tech support. And it's like, well, maybe what about Web3 entrepreneur? That probably wasn't even on the radar. But so after you got like the rejections from the product folks, or maybe just deadening silence, at which point were you like, okay, I should code? Was it as a result of like realizing that, maybe there's hard skills or easier to get jobs with? I mean, what kind of got you to like think about that?
Yeah, I'd been thinking about it for a long time, and for the longest time it was one of those like, it was this fallacy in my head that like it was too late for me to learn to code, or like it would take too long, because like I've always been kind of a nerd, like a tech nerd, good at computers. But for me in like high school, as a kid, like I would build computer hardware. Like my uncle gave me parts, and then I'd put together a computer, and that was a lot of fun for me. And so I always like felt like that I had a missed opportunity where I could have been one of those, coder nerd kids that just like learns to code when they're 8, and like, I just felt like I missed the boat, which is obviously just totally wrong.
Yeah.
But my first venture into coding was like 2017, 2018. I had an idea for a music app that would make collaborating on songs a little bit more easy, a little bit easier on the cloud. It was basically where you could upload these songs that you're working on. Say like I was mixing or producing a song for a band, and then I could upload the songs to them, and they could leave comments, like kind of like SoundCloud, where you leave it on the you can leave a comment like 47 seconds, like, hey, turn the vocals up here or something like that. And to make that, I was, I had no tech skills. I conned a friend of mine he was a Google engineer at the time, into helping me build it. And we actually made a go of it. One of the things that stopped it was just like me not understanding like any lean startup principles, and just wanting the MVP to be like way more than it needed to be. And I think he just got tired of me. But at one point he suggested like, hey, you should learn how to code. I think you'd be smart enough to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. So I at the time, Code Academy had these I think they were called intensives, and you paid like $200, and it was like 8 weeks, and you learned JavaScript and React. And so I did that, and at the end of it, felt completely overwhelmed and like nowhere near understanding how an application worked. Because 8 weeks is just like not enough time to go from zero coding to like full React. At least it was for me. And so I kind of gave up, honestly, for a while until eventually what got me back into it was I was doing fantasy football stuff like really hardcore and like analyzing stats and stuff. And spreadsheets just weren't enough for me, so I texted a friend and was like, hey, what can I learn to do this stuff? Because I'd like to get better at data analysis. And he suggested learning Python and SQL. And so I started Python and SQL, and I honestly loved it. It was, I think, a combination of seeing any coding language for the second time, and then also I think Python is easier to learn than JavaScript. It's a little less syntax heavy. It's just all about indentation, and it's very semantic. Like it just, you kind of just say what you want to do, and then it does it if you do it correctly, obviously. So I did that for a little bit, and then I think I did make a little like Django bootstrap application for fantasy football where it like made a very simple API request and like told you which players you had on all your fantasy teams. That was maybe, I guess, last summer before I kind of jumped on with you. So when, I met you and you were doing Parsity and it's all obviously all in JavaScript, I was like, okay, that's fine. And I think like, even though if I had stuck with it the first time in 2017 or 2018, I would have, probably be a senior dev with a lot of money. I feel like this like long drawn out process has helped me a lot because I think, like I always say that like it always feels like you have to learn every coding lesson 3 times. And so for me, that was the first time I learned JavaScript and I was like, what the hell is this? The second time I learned Python, it was like, okay, I get this. I get how it works. And then the third time with Parsity, it was like, okay, I get this and now I know how to use it. And I think that that helped me tremendously because you can definitely go from, relatively 0 to 1 through a boot camp, but it's certainly a lot easier if you have just anything beforehand.
Yeah, man. No, I 100% agree. And I think that's like what I'm always trying to explain actually on the podcast is I'm trying to pull out basically the experience you had and create some kind of prescription, which is a recipe that's impossible to create. But I always say like you have to have like a first exposure, right? The first time that you go through learning JavaScript, like you're not going to get everything, and then you gotta see it again and then again to kind of fill in the gaps. But a lot of people are missing that ingredient, which is, and Peter and I have been, he's the other podcast host, trying to sum it up, and he summed it up well, which is this idea of process over results, which I don't think it feels that way when you're in the middle of it, but like even the story you're telling here is you thinking of things you're interested in and then just going after them. And then the result is seemingly nil sort of over and over again until it's not, but the thing that keeps on bringing you back is you're interested in it, right? And you actually genuinely want to know about it. It's like, were you going to, I don't know, maybe you were, build a career off of your fantasy football app? Probably not. Like, was it a useless app? 100%. But can a lot of people create an app that does a full round trip with an API call? Like, no. I mean, not even after going through a boot camp can a lot of people are able to do that. But it's like this thing you build in yourself to where it's like, hey, I'm okay with just the process of going after it, learning, making some progress, a couple steps back, tinkering, figuring out how it works. Whereas the recipe for people who don't do well in boot camps is, okay, I showed up, I got here, now give it all to me. And at the end of this, like, start paying me, because that just doesn't work. Like, there is no easy way. And I think you're right. Like and I say this to everybody, like, if you're the best boot camp students probably could go without the boot camp, like it might take you a couple months, years, longer, that kind of thing. But like, we just got to set you on a path, and then you'll probably get there, because you're self-motivated, you're intrigued by like the things you're learning. I don't know. Am I like BSing? Does that sound right to you?
No, totally. I have a couple of thoughts to that. I mean, one is, yes, like I am like smart enough to have like, or that's not a good way to put it. There is enough content on Code Academy for you to go from zero to a job engineer, and then people have done it. In the Facebook group, I see people do it, but it's very rare. And you post about this all the time because it's just really hard to believe. Like, I think what it is everybody has the low moments in anything, but like especially with learning to code, you have the low moments where either you wake up and you don't care about coding, or you get stuck and it appears that no one in the universe has ever had, come to this issue and you can't solve it and you want to give up forever. Right. And with Code Academy, even if you pay the, $150 a year for the pro thing, it's not enough incentive to like force you through. So you could just give up and maybe never come back. But like with the bootcamp, you're paying a lot more, so it'd be a little bit tougher to give up. And I think one of the things that helps the most about the bootcamp is not necessarily the content. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but I think what helps the most is just being forced to build an app every weekend. I think that was the difference for me, because I'm not good at school, and I've never liked school, but that always works for me.
It's funny. And then those who are good at school are usually wigged out by the experience, because they're like, oh, I can't study for this. Like, there's nothing to read, there's nothing to review, nothing to memorize. It's like, opposite. Like, your memorization will help you go faster, but you just get good at Googling. Like, then you can look up syntax. Like, the learning is not, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a I don't know about like experienced devs, but I have a permanent tab open with MDN, because even if I, remember the exact syntax for a map, like I'm just going to type it in and look at it real quick just in case. You know, the memorization doesn't really, it's not totally necessary, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's like also.
All right, since I've got, oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
I was going to say that's also something that comes with the territory to like always using Prettier and always using Alenter, is like sometimes you forget those really basic things because your VS Code is doing it for you all the time.
It is too good. Yeah, I learned that the hard way when I first started writing JavaScript. I didn't use Alenter or Pretty or anything like that, and then most of my PR comments were about my ugly style until basically I got PR reviewed into having good JavaScript style. Okay, I wanted to transition and ask you guys, since we've got a couple of quote success stories, not to jinx you on your new venture or anything like that. Are you guys both drinking a good beer? Am I missing out here? What are y'all drinking?
I just got back from New York and got some. Nice. I just got back from New York, and I always bring back beer from, it's called Other Half Brewing. I'm a huge hazy IPA nerd, so they make some of the best.
Okay. And what were you drinking, Doug?
Dallas Blonde. From Deep Ellum.
Dallas Blonde. Who's that? Where's that from? Okay. All right.
Dallas.
I'm like getting back into my Austin beers and trying to remember like what's around here, because I finally transitioned over to North Carolina beers. So I'm wondering how to get back. Okay. We've got a couple success stories. I just wanted to ask a couple questions. You guys, either one of y'all can answer, but what was the hardest thing for you? And obviously not like Parsity specific. I mean, if it is, that's cool. But like about the process going through a boot camp, like what, in other words, what kind of encouragement can you offer boot camp students, things to look out for? What were the biggest hurdles you had to overcome?
Man, I think for me, the hardest thing was, sorry, I think we have some kind of a little bit of a delay going on here or something, but the hardest thing for me was, it's because it's a new language, and because I hadn't done anything like it before, other than like barely poking around with some HTML and CSS and stuff. it's just like it really is just like mumbo jumbo at first, right? So learning to organize the way that you approach it, and having the like roadmap that you give us to know what's important and what's not. Like I remember there's so many times in the videos and stuff where you're just like, you're not going to understand what this means, ignore it, like worry about it later. Or sometimes it may be like, hey, go read the docs on this, you have time, just know that this is like some boilerplate that you need to do this, don't worry about it too much. And I think if you don't have someone telling you that, like letting you off the hook a little bit, you can just look at everything as a big menagerie of just BS. And so I think having that guided focus, and then like Nathan said, like having to spit out a program every week, you don't really have the option. So it can be really hard to like, trust yourself. And like Nathan can tell you, there were several points during the program where I was like at my wit's end a little bit, just like I can't do this. I feel like I'm not picking this up fast enough. I feel like I'm not smart enough to do it or whatever. Like stick with it, because the longer that you do things that are like actually applicable to what coding in the real world is like, the more you realize is like everyone already figured out the really, really hard stuff. So now we have tools that make it a lot easier for us. So if you can learn those tools well, you're on your way,
That's awesome. Yeah, you cultivate this attitude of thankfulness where you're like, oh, it's not as bad as it could be, because you're coming at the end here. That's awesome. Nathan, what about you, man?
Yeah, I think probably the hardest part for me was learning how to get unstuck and or unfrustrated. I have maybe you can answer this. I have a theory that like some of the content with Parsity is not comprehensive, like intentionally. And so what I mean by that is like, I love that Parsity is like a bunch of short videos and you're not meaning to be comprehensive, but like I would get like super frustrated on the weekends when we were doing the evals because it'd be like, there would be something that you didn't explain or I just totally missed, and I would just be so, I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't know what it was a part of, or like how to find it. And like, I think you do that intentionally so that we learn how to get unstuck. And so like learning when to stop and like walk away, go for a walk, and like trusting myself that eventually I'm going to figure it out is like really important. Being able to, I don't know, you just like, there comes a point, like for me, it was around learning React, and it was just kind of like, we realized like, oh, at some point every weekend, I'm going to figure out how to make this. Like, I'm going to go through getting super frustrated and then like eventually get out of it, get unstuck enough to like finish it. And like, that's really helpful now because we're building these apps that we've never made before, and there are libraries that we haven't used before, and that's always coding, because there's always something new you have to learn. And there's so many stories of Parsity students who have graduated and gotten a job in a totally new language like relatively quickly, and it's not a big deal because you're teaching concepts, and once you get to a certain understanding of like how to build apps, it doesn't matter what the framework is. I'm probably rambling at this point, but what I felt like was the biggest lesson I took from the whole thing was just being able to trust myself that like you can kind of just build anything at this point. And that's what makes coding feel like a superpower, is like at a certain point, you're like, wow, I can just do, like, with enough time, I can build anything. And that was really cool.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's exactly what I would hope you would say. Now, I don't know if the curriculum was intentional or not. It may not be, but yeah, my wife used to tell me, I got my first job at this company in downtown Austin. I don't think it exists anymore, where it's sold. It was called Spreadfast. And we would have like a small team, and there were a couple developers, a couple designers, and a product owner, and like we the whole company was like these small teams that worked in small sprints. And we'd usually work off of like 1 week sprints where we'd, not necessarily start a whole new project on Monday, but we'd start working on something on Monday. Then on Friday, we'd like demo it and drink beer. And I remember like after several weeks, it was like a Monday or Tuesday, and I came home and I was just completely like melted and almost in tears, like telling my wife, like, I just can't do this. Like, all these other people are super smart. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm an idiot. And she looked at me and she said, you have done this every single day for the last 6 weeks. You've come home on a Monday or a Tuesday and have lamented how dumb you are. And then you've come home on a Thursday or Friday and have celebrated how awesome you are. She goes, so right now it is Monday. By Friday, you're going to be fine. And I didn't realize that. And she was so right. And it still happens to me these days too sometimes. It's because of that same cycle of like, all right, I'm encountering something new today. Holy crap. Like, there's no way I can overcome this. And then when you do, like, that's when like those new connections are built. It's like, I'm never going to forget that ever again. I might not have memorized some necessary syntax for that, but I'll never again forget how to do that. Or more importantly, I'll never forget that I can do that,
Yeah.
And if I can do this, then I can probably do the next thing, then the next and the next. And, before you know it, you're starting your own company and building these, minting sites for these organizations. No, I think that's a perfect example of the process you go through. It's really hard to like running a program like Parsity. Like, how can you do that and not kill people or like prevent them from quitting? And sometimes it's too much. It's not meant for every person because not everyone would. There's not a lot of hand holding. There's not a lot of answers, and so it can be too much. And sometimes it is our fault whenever it's like, oh, we could have been more clear. So
well, I think that
there's grace on both sides of that equation.
That lack of hand-holding is, I think, part of what makes it so successful. Because as Nathan mentioned earlier, like it forces you to push through those moments, and there's nothing quite like really struggling with a component or a feature or what have you, and like getting a bunch of error messages and like getting down on yourself and frustrated and not being able to find any answers from anyone. And then like after hours or days or however long it's been, you get it to work. You figure out the solution. And that sense of accomplishment is what spurs you forward. And if you're always just copying code that someone else has put in front of you, it's hard to have those moments. It's hard to have those victories because whenever you're stuck, you can kind of just reference that and push through. So I think making us wrestle with it was really important.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I think that's the best perspective to have, and if you're not there, it is going to be really hard for you to learn because that is the job. Like, it is to go through that process. And at some point I do think it flips to being, holy crap, I have to do this, to, this is a great challenge and I know I can, and I know what I'm going to be able to do on the other side of this. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but I do want to ask, like, what kind of closing, I don't know if advice is the right word here, would you have for other people? I think there's something here that I want to encourage other kind of bootcamp grad types with, which is that there are other ways to do like this part of the process of like, you finish the bootcamp, you have other alternatives, and maybe the encouragement is you're smarter, you know more, and you're more capable than you think. Like, you don't have to like walk around begging for a job. But what would that be from you guys? What would y'all say to somebody who's in the position that you were just in, even a few weeks ago?
Yeah, that's something I'm kind of like telling myself every day through this, but or figuring out myself every day. I would just say, like, there's been times, in this process, like taking that contract gig at first to doing this, and I've talked to a lot of friends along the way, and most of, everyone said to go for it, but like, there's been times where it's felt really risky to take, like, instead of getting getting a junior job with health insurance and a senior dev to ask questions for and show me the right things, the right way to do things for a couple of years. Like that would be cool. But I know myself, and I know I would get bored and unfulfilled doing that kind of thing. And like doing this contract stuff and now starting our own company, like, you know, when you ask your question, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen here? And it's really not that bad. Like you know, for the first contract gig, like, okay, the worst thing that happened is I lose that job and then I'm back where I started with the same experience. And that's the same answer here really is like, we basically have put up, you know, our upfront capital was the cost of the LLC. And so that's pretty much what we have to lose. If this thing, you know, it could be that we just got lucky and these first couple of clients just like, it just kind of happened to work out and we never ever get a client again. And then we'll just be out the cost of that LLC and we're back where we started with more experience. But like to me, so in that way, this is a fairly asymmetric risk, meaning like there's a huge upside here that I could, you know, work for myself, from anywhere, get to code, get to work on projects that I like, and also get to work on different projects to keep, you know, it's exciting. One aspect of this is exciting to get to work on different stuff. And there's obviously the upside of, you know, making more money than we probably would have in a traditional career path. And obviously that may not happen, but to me, it's worth taking that risk just to see, because if in 6 months I'm back where I started, I'm not really back where I started. I have this whole experience and I can, you know, get a job from it. So I would just say, like, if you have the idea, if you have if you're in the position to take this type of a risk, like, just do it and just see what happens. It's not like always ask yourself, like, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And I would just say go for it. And then, you know, just in general, I've thought about this while you were talking is in terms of like consistency for like learning how to code. I think you may have shared this or you may have liked it, and I saw it on LinkedIn, but there's like this graph of like what showing up every day actually looks like. It's like what you think showing up every day looks like is like showing up and coding for 10 hours every day until you're an expert. And what it really looks like is like this graph that goes up and down like a roller coaster. What it really is like sitting down to code some days and coding for 5 minutes and then realizing that your brain's just not there and giving up for the day. But then you show up the next day and you're able to code for a couple hours. And even if you're like me and it takes you 5 years to like really develop that, it's like, that's okay. That's, you know, for whatever reason, that's what it took for me to get from here to there. And it was obviously worthwhile, or it appears like it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so, man. That's great stuff. Yeah, you're in a much better position than if you're just job searching. Like, I think you're right. Like I think maybe we talked about this, the book Anti-Fragile, and he talks about this idea of taking kind of risks where you can mitigate your downside, and as long as your downside is covered, then your upside is basically limitless. And so in your case, you're right. You know, you lose this gig and you're back to where you are searching for a job, which is where you were anyways. So like your loss is not nothing necessarily, because there's some time involved in that and a delay in what could have been, but it's minimal. And then your upside, you're right. Like, you could have unlimited income potential, you know, which is not the case in any W-2 job, basically. Like, there's a cap, and it takes many, many, many years to get to that cap. I love that, and I think, you know, you're going to learn through the process regardless. Doug, man, anything you'd add to that?
What was the original question? I think I've lost it at this point.
We asked you to predict the future of the crypto market.
It's looking good.
No, yeah, it's looking good.
Not really.
Bye. I think basically it's, how would you encourage another bootcamp grad at this point, knowing what you know now about what's possible? How would you encourage someone who's just finishing up a bootcamp?
I would say that when you first start putting your resume and your cover letter and all that stuff together, and you're thinking about portfolio and all that stuff, like I definitely think that stuff matters, but I also think like you can wait trying to find the right opportunity. You can wait too long to start trying to find the right opportunity if you're trying to like get all your ducks in a row and you know, make your final project as polished it can be. And like I certainly fell into some of that, but I think you just kind of have to start doing it. And the cool thing is that once you start picking up some of these small contract gigs, like you're working in a real code environment with other people, and you're putting into practice everything you've learned. And so if it doesn't work out and you do need to go that traditional route, you can point to that and say, hey, look, I've been doing this like in the real world. And I think it ups your chances of getting a better position right off the bat, rather than just being like, hey, I graduated. Here's my group project. Here's this other project. You know, I think like being able to point to a real body of work that's making people money is a good way to go right after school.
That's awesome. Yeah, it kills the recipe apps, you know, much better than recipe apps. Oh, that's awesome, guys. Okay, I want to close this down for the sake of time because we're at time here. Is there a plug that y'all have? Do y'all have a website up yet? Is there somewhere where you can find your services online, something like that?
Yes,
it
will be depending on when you post this because we're finishing. Yeah.
By tonight. Okay, well, this ain't going up tonight, so this is perfect.
Cool. So yeah, it's drakewest.dev, and you can email either of us, Nathan or Doug, at drakewest.dev.
That's awesome. The combination of your last names sounds like it could either be a law firm or a hotel. It sounds regal, Drake West.
Yeah, it's not like the coolest name we've come up with, but it was kind of like, you know, these things were moving pretty quickly, and we were like, okay, we got to get a bank account, we got to get all this stuff, and like we tried one name. I think Doug came up with Web3 Wizards, which I thought was hilarious, and then I looked up the domain, and it was literally a Web3 dev agency with the exact same thing, and we're like, screw it, we'll just do the legal version, and we can DBA it later if we come up with something better.
I love it, but I will be thinking about, I'm staying at the Drake West tonight. I'm investing in Drake West Capital. You can always pivot. Yep. Hotels, law firm, all those things. Awesome. Anything else that you guys want to add before we skedaddle here?
Well, I was thinking about this while Doug was talking, but every like aspiring dev should read the Lean Startup, not only because of, you know, dev stuff, but also just thinking about your career. Like most people, including myself, you know, we overthink the resume or the final project or whatever, and the point isn't any of that stuff. It's just doing stuff. So just go out and do stuff.
That's a great suggestion. I never thought about reading it for other reasons, but if I think about it, it has rewired the way I approach anything, which is like just ship it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
The market, the forces that be, they'll tell you how to change.
For sure.
Very cool. Well, thanks for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
All right, there are a few things I want to plug for you if you are interested in following a similar path to Nathan and Doug. The first one is an exciting launch of a new podcast that I have started. I'm not actually the host of this podcast. I'm just helping produce it, called Build, Learn, Web3. I'm going to leave a link to that podcast in the show notes here. This has been started with a co-founder of mine in another project called DevMint. This is Brian Schuster and I have started this organization that helps take Web 2 senior engineers and train them in Web 3 and then place them in Web 3 positions. So we built a podcast all about this transition into Web 3 that if you're interested in Web 3, you should definitely check it out. Next, the other thing I want to plug here is Parsity, our online code school that we talked about that Doug and Nathan came through. We have another cohort launching on October 17th. You need to know the fundamentals of JavaScript in order to be accepted into the program, but you can do that through another thing that we have called Dev 30. We're also launching a new cohort of Dev 30 starting in October as well. This is a 30-day JavaScript cohort-based course focused on not just developing your JavaScript skills, but developing your mindset, your habits, and your network, very much in line with the things this podcast talks about. So you can find those things at parsity.io or dev30.xyz or devmint at devmint.xyz. And as always, be sure to check out Peter. Has an amazing YouTube channel. He's also coming out with some awesome Udemy courses on taking you from junior developer to senior. I think actually the name of his course is Junior to Senior. So check out all those links in the show notes. And as always, we're excited that you came to listen to this podcast with us, and we'll see you, or you'll hear us next week.